what was the focus of this report. We focus on the role of the international development community to promote more inclusive and resilient sustainable ocean economies in developing countries. There are several reports that focus on ocean economy, but I would say this is quite a special report because it is focused precisely on this role of international community to promote sustainable oceans in developing countries. The report highlights the relative greater reliance of developing countries on ocean-based sectors and therefore the opportunities from an expanding global ocean economy, as well as greater risks from increasing deterioration in resources and ecosystems. While the COVID-19 crisis is severely affecting key ocean-based sectors, we have seen it on tourism and shipping, with a halting effect on much of the global ocean economy. At the same time, demands on marine resources for food, energy, minerals, leisure, and other needs of a growing global population will only intensify over time. We use the report findings to call for systemic transformational and urgent changes needed to support the transition to global sustainable ocean economy. Policies and financing need to be proactive and bold to help align investments towards sustainability. I hope that you are getting me right, Jens. Is it okay, the connection?
Yes, you can hear
sorry,
well.
Because suddenly there was a drop in the sound. So this means a reverse in current trends. We are off track. For example, between 2013 and 2018, less than 1% of global ODA supported sustainable ocean-based economy activities and conservation. That is a drop in the ocean. Our report provides a wealth of new evidence and advice to help developing countries turn new and traditional ocean-based sectors into catalysts of inclusive, sustainable development, setting the baseline on three key topics. First, the economic trends of ocean-based industries across developing countries, their contribution to value added and employment, and the relative weight of ocean economy in the GDP of different developing countries. So this is one key pillar of this report, the economic trends. Second, it's the policy frameworks and economic instruments. For instance, taxes, fees, and charges needed to enhance the sustainability of ocean economies and ocean conservation. And finally, the report focuses on how development cooperation can help foster sustainable ocean economies. The report provides the first ever OECD figures on official development assistance, ODA, for the sustainable ocean economy. As I mentioned before, less than 1%, precisely it's 0.8% ODA going to sustainable oceans. But in addition to these ODA figures, it includes a review of innovative financing instruments for sustainable ocean economies developed with all the support. And Pierre, that has been the coordinator of this report under Jens' supervision, will go into these findings and recommendations in greater detail. As you can see, we are keen to work in an horizontal and collaborative manner at OECD with all our members and stakeholders to make sure development cooperation effectively contributes to sustainable ocean economies in developing countries. This is a journey. Over yet. That's why I'm so pleased to introduce today in this opening Russell Reichelt, Australia's Sherpa to the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. Australia is strongly engaged, as we all know, in supporting countries embark in sustainable ocean economies in the Pacific and worldwide. So Australia has also been a key supporter of the OECD work on small island developing states, which is at the origin of this work on sustainable ocean economies. As we know, many states see in their vast ocean resources a key opportunity to diversify their economies and build resilience. So let me now pass the floor to Russell. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the OECD and Jorge Moreira da Silva for your invitation. I congratulate the OECD for producing the report, A Sustainable Ocean for All, because all people should enjoy the benefits that our oceans have to offer, and we should all strive to protect our ocean so it can continue to provide such immense benefits into the future. Australia is proud to be one of the 14 members of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, led by our co-chairs, Prime Minister of Norway and President of Palau. But for brevity in this talk, let me call it the Ocean Panel. The Ocean Panel began in 2018 and will soon finalise its assessment and recommendations for action. The Ocean Panel's framework for ocean action covers 5 critical areas: ocean wealth, health, equity, knowledge, and finance, and recognises that action in all of these areas is required to achieve a sustainable ocean economy. With the COVID-19 pandemic, this task is such even more urgent. So we must strive harder to build resilience for these economies. The Ocean Panel plans to launch its Transformations for a Sustainable Ocean Economy at the beginning of December, just ahead of the Our Ocean conference to be hosted by Palau at the end of the year. I see very useful synergies between the work of the panel and the OECD in supporting the global transition to a sustainable ocean economy. And I want to acknowledge OECD's robust engagement with the panel's deliberations. Thank you, Jorge. And the work OECD has done working with the panel, I'm very grateful, and thank you to the OECD. Australia sees the need to work not only within our own jurisdiction, but recognises that a sustainable ocean economy is underpinned by a healthy ocean is of paramount importance to our Indo-Pacific neighbours. Australia is committed to a secure, prosperous and sustainable Blue Pacific. We are supporting Pacific Island countries to establish maritime zones and to secure their marine entitlements. We are contributing to enhancing maritime security capability and to implementing the Pacific Regional Action Plan on marine litter. We're also supporting the conservation and effective management of blue carbon ecosystems, such as mangroves and seagrasses across the Indo-Pacific. Australia is working closely with Indonesia as the co-chairs of the Regional Plan of Action to promote responsible fishing practices, including combating illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing practices in Southeast Asia. With Indonesia, who are also a member of the Ocean Panel, we are focused on fisheries information sharing, surveillance and response activities, and protecting coral reefs and blue carbon ecosystems. Australia is a firm supporter of gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of the sustainable management of oceans, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. I'm pleased that under Australia's chairing in 2013 to 2015, the Indian Ocean Rim Association introduced both the blue economy and women's economic empowerment as policy priorities. Australia is working with UN Women to promote women's economic empowerment in fisheries in the Indian Ocean Rim countries. Similarly, our work in supporting economic growth and infrastructure in the Pacific, we're taking specific actions to identify and address constraints for women to participate and benefit equally with men. We also support our Pacific partners to advance their own gender equality priorities. For example, Australia's technical assistance helps strengthen women's access to skills and jobs in maritime operations, where women are currently underrepresented due to obstacles such as skills gaps, violence, and lack of gender-sensitive policies and legislation. We support the Pacific Community's Solomon Islands Women in Maritime program to coordinate on national efforts to connect, educate, support, and inspire women in the maritime sector. Through rural training centres, women are supported with job placements into shipyards and maritime operations. Australia also recognises the importance of the ocean in the context of climate change. Last September, the Ocean Panel released a call to ocean-based climate action, which showed how the ocean can make an important contribution to our economic transition to carbon neutrality, including by investing in nature-based solutions, harnessing ocean-based renewable energy, and decarbonising ocean industries, especially shipping. I welcome you all to engage in this important discussion on the state of our global ocean, on how we can all progress towards the objective of a sustainable ocean economy for all. Thank you, and best wishes for productive discussions. Thank you, Oi.
Thank you very much, Russell. Thank you very much, George, for these introductions. I think they kicked us off to a great start. Now, as I am going to give the floor to Piera for the presentation, let me just recall some of the key messages that we heard, partly from George and from Russell, but also from the report to set the scene for the focus of this session on development cooperation. Now, while the expected expansion of the ocean economy holds potential for all countries, overall the ocean economy is projected to grow at twice the rate of the world economy. That's particular potential for developing countries. And for many of them, ocean-based industries such as tourism and fisheries are already key sources of incomes and drivers of economic growth. At the same time, so far, these sectors have really expanded with little consideration for environmental and social sustainability. And so there's a big question of whether it's possible to realize this potential, but that's very much contingent on how the future shape of the approach looks. And at the same time, so many developing countries are already at the forefront of the impacts of climate change, ocean pollution, and overfishing. Now, we also know that many developing countries have invariably more limited capacity and access to finance, policy development and implementation, and the science that is needed to achieve the transition to sustainable ocean economies. And I think that's where there's then an essential role for development cooperation to facilitate access and promote more international coherence. Finally, of course, the overall overarching priority that's dominating everything is the COVID-19 pandemic, with its massive impacts, which obviously is also affecting the ocean economies. And even though you may not have the ocean economy as a first sufferer in mind, obviously ocean-based sectors such as, again, tourism, sea transport, but also others are very much being disrupted by the effects of the pandemic. And I think it's very clear and essential to recognize that the approach to the recovery from the COVID pandemic will be very much defining for the economy and for the sustainability of the approaches. And by that, for the development potential of the sustainable ocean economy for developing countries. Again, their development partners, development cooperation and finance has a key role to play in working with and supporting developing countries in making sure they can use this transition in a way that shifts towards more sustainability. These are issues that are discussed in chapters 4 and 5 of the report. In particular, chapter 5, for the first time, provides official tracking of official development assistance, ODA, for sustainable ocean economies. And by doing this, it doesn't only provide a picture, but also helps foster a common understanding of sustainability and how they vary across different ocean-based sectors. And then chapter 5 focuses on how development cooperation can mobilize private finance for sustainable ocean economies and also help to reorient private finance away from harmful and unsustainable approaches. It quantifies the private finance mobilized, but also identifies a range of instruments, including blue bonds, debt for nature swaps, blue carbon schemes, and other ocean risk management tools. And all of these have been developed with development cooperation, which I think, again, is a testimony to the role and importance of development cooperation in the entire endeavor. Now, with that, let me now give the floor to Piera to introduce these topics in more detail and kick us further off for the discussion. Piera, please go ahead. And please unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jens, for the floor. Just trying to make sure that you can see. So thank you, Jens, and thank you for this great introductions, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Piera Tortora, as you heard, and today I'm really delighted to be here with you and to discuss, as we heard, some of the findings from the Sustainable Ocean Floor report, especially the ones on development finance and development cooperation that are in chapters 4 and 5. And these are chapters that I've authored under the oversight of George, the guidance of Jens, and with research assistance by Alberto Agnelli, who's also here with us, but also Veronica Villena and Piero Fontalan. So today, the way we thought we might want to discuss these findings is by focusing on 3 key questions. So the first one will be how much development finance was channeled towards the ocean economy, and is it really helping to enhance sustainability? We also want to look at in what ways development finance is helping to mobilize additional resources, and in particular private finance, and what are some of the new financial instruments that are available to finance sustainable ocean economies in developing countries. And thirdly, we would like to explore a little bit of question around how can development cooperation not only help mobilize additional resources, but really divert and reorient much of the finance that right now is going towards unsustainable economic activities in the space of the ocean economy. So let's start from the first question. Here it is. So how much development finance is channeled towards the ocean economy? And to answer this question, as you heard, for this report, we have conducted an exercise about developing a new methodology and a computer coding to be able to extract from our OECD predatory reporting system database information on development finance to the ocean economy, and also a methodology to then assess and estimate how much of this is actually contributing to sustainability. So it's contributing to sustainable ocean economies. And here you can see a chart that shows you a little bit the trend between the period that we consider, which is 2013, 2018. You can see that there's been a peak in the development finance allocated towards the ocean economy. And also that in 2017-18, actually finance to the ocean economy is substantially larger than it was at the start of this period. So it averaged $4 billion US dollars on average a year in 2017-18 compared to 2.4 billion at the start of the period. And also, if we look at the speed of growth in the ODA channel to the ocean economy, the official development assistance channel to the ocean economy, actually we see that the growth rate was much higher than the growth rate of global ODA in the same period. So ODA to the ocean economy grew at by 57% over the period compared to 17% for global ODA. And this really is a reflection of the growing interest and growing international engagement around sustainable ocean issues. And so this is very much good news. What is not good news is actually that, as you can see from the right panel chart, the ODA towards the ocean economy, well, first of all, is still a fraction of global ODA, actually that you don't see from the right panel. But I tell you, it's 1.6% only of global ODA. And also, and this is what you see on the right, ODA to the ocean economy only partially supports sustainability. So only 51% of ODA towards the ocean economy contributing to what we assess as a sustainable ocean economy. And this represents only 0.8% of global ODA between 2013 and 2018. Now, to put these figures a little bit into perspective, we can also compare them to the funding that is allocated to other SDGs. So we take ODA to the Sustainable Ocean Economy as a proxy for funding to SDG 14th. And you can see from this chart that SDG 14th is definitely one of the least funded SDGs across all of them, both by ODA and by development finance from philanthropies, which is actually the blue line. And for philanthropies, we have used another database that also the OECD DAC is a custodian of, which is the database on development finance from philanthropies. So now what we see as some of the major factors behind this low allocations towards the sustainable ocean economy are the following. Well, first of all, the concept of a sustainable ocean economy is fairly new. So many development partners have a long track record of support to some specific sectors of the ocean economy. For example, to fisheries or to marine protection. But a more holistic understanding of the sustainable ocean economy, where actually sectors need to be understood at the same time, and the trade-offs across sectors that compose the ocean economy need to be understood and mitigated, and synergies need to be fostered. So, for example, across fisheries, across marine protection, across tourism, this is something fairly new. And as a reflection, actually, only no DAC member, actually, no member of the Development Assistance Committee has an official definition even of what the sustainable ocean economy is. Many members have working definitions, and this anyway range a number of different sectors. So while they all incorporate this idea of a need to reconcile economic opportunities with protecting ocean health, the kind of sectors that then each member includes in this working definitions are quite different, and some also include offshore oil and gas or extractive industries. And so as a consequence, donors also do not have dedicated strategies to support the sustainable ocean economy in developing countries. They do not have, most of them, specific implementation or monitoring tools. And this is also linked to the fact that there is an overall lack of data and analysis that is specific to the sustainable ocean economy that could actually guide the development of these policies and these guidances. But now let's take a look, let's take a closer look at where development finance for the ocean economy goes. And here you can see that ODA for the ocean economy is very much concentrated in three sectors. These are maritime transport, fishing, and marine protection. And we think that in a way, this very large concentration only on three sectors, in a way may signal that the opportunity that also George was describing of the sustainable ocean economy to unlock new sectors and thereby foster more economic diversification and therefore greater resilience is not being completely exploited by the support provided by the international community. And in this chart, you can also see that support to different sectors across the ocean economy integrate sustainability to a different extent. And this is the level of the water, let's say, that you see in each of these bubbles. So of course, marine protection will be by construction 100% contributing to sustainability. But the top sector, for example, maritime transport, contributes only, funding to maritime transport only integrates sustainability by 24%. This is quite an interesting finding, we find. Then if we look at individual recipients of ocean economy ODA, and here we can see the top recipients. We also see that most of top recipients, not all of them, but most of top recipients mainly receive ODA for the ocean economy in support of ocean economy, ocean-based industries without really a concern to integrate sustainability. And we also see if we were able to see the continuation of this distribution, so even the tail of the distribution, we would see that while the top providers mostly receive funding for ocean-based industries, not necessarily incorporating sustainability, actually the recipients that receive the least amounts, actually they receive more funding for, in proportion, like as a share of the total that they receive for the ocean economy ODA, they receive more for conservation. So in a way, it's like the international community is having this dichotomous approach. Either they provide very little and these amounts are for conservation, or the big amounts are actually for ocean-based industries without really sustainability concerns. So what is driving the allocations of ocean economy ODA is not really much greater funding for conservation, is not much greater funding for developing ocean-based sectors sustainably. But despite this, actually, there are some good examples of projects by the international community that do enhance sustainability. And what we do in the report is that we pick 6 areas of the sustainable ocean economy that you see there. So conservation and restoration of the ocean, sustainable and traceable seafood, sustainable tourism, curbing ocean pollution from land, green in ports and shipping, and renewable ocean energy. And we really delve into what are the kind of projects that the international community is conducting to enhance the sustainability in these areas. And we think that this is particularly important because we need to understand the multidimensionality of sustainability in the sphere of the ocean economy. When we think about green finance, mainly there are 2 criteria that are considered, which are lowering green gas emissions and or enhancing energy efficiency. But when we think about finance for the sustainable ocean economy, there are many more dimensions to keep in mind. And so the range of actions within each of the sectors varies largely. So the actions that are needed to enhance sustainability in the fishery sector, of course, are very much different from the ones in the shipping sector. So the kind of analysis that we do in the report help to shed light on this. And so to move us towards a common understanding of what sustainability means across the various sectors of the ocean economy, but also provide some examples of replicable good practices. So now let's move to the second question. In what ways is development finance helping to mobilize other sources of funding, especially private finance, and what are the new financing instruments available? And this is very, we see this part also as very important because as George and Jens mentioned, we really need to have a systemic change when it comes to the ocean economy. So it is very important that public policies and funding and therefore also international ODA policies and funding not only are used to fund directly sustainable activities, and this is what we've just seen, whereas the money going directly from ODA and from the international community, but also how can it be used? Like what are the regulations and policies and the financial levers that can be used to tilt the playing field towards sustainability, to encourage private sector to align towards the sustainability imperative and really co-shape and co-create sustainable products and sustainable business models. So what we do in the report is that we look at using another database that we have at the OECD DAC on the private amounts mobilized by ODA. We look at how much private finance was mobilized through ODA in the space of the ocean economy. And we look both at land-based activities that do have an impact on ocean, for example, waste management, water waste treatment, etc. But also we look at ocean-based industries per se. And we see that in 2013, 2017, actually ODA was able to mobilize 2.92 billion of private finance. And you also see here on the left, the split up between how much went to mobilize resources in land-based industries, 57%, and how much actually went to mobilize resources in the ocean economy industries per se. And you also see in the right panel chart that ODA used actually a number of leveraging instruments. So standard grants and loans, but also credit lines, co-financing schemes, but also guarantees. And you can see how those different instruments were used to mobilize resources across the sectors of the ocean economy and the land-based ocean relevant industries. For example, you see that one of the instruments that mobilized the most funding, the most private funding, was guarantees, and it was mainly used in the water and sanitation sector. Now, in the report, you will also find this kind of information. So we look at all these instruments, ODA instruments, and we see how much they leverage, in which countries, what was the number of transactions and how big they were, etc. So this is all information. I will not go through this, but it's all information that you find in the report. And the other thing that we see, so not only through some different kinds of blended finance arrangements, ODAs being able to leverage private finance, but it's also at the origin of new financing instruments and approaches that have emerged to mobilize greater resources for sustainable ocean economies. So in the report, we get into the details around new debt instruments like debt for ocean swaps, like blue bonds, like new insurance schemes, new impact investing funds, and blue carbon schemes that have developed with the help of the international development community. And we go into the details around how big this the market of this instruments is, what are some of the challenges and opportunities to develop them further, and what could be the role of the international community in this respect. I'm not sure we have time, maybe I'm asking Jens to go into the details of them, just to provide maybe a little more information on the blue bonds. But just to say that, as many of you may be aware, in 2018, the Seychelles released the first sovereign blue bond in the world, and it was a $15 million bond. And we see that actually this there's quite a bit of potential for blue bonds to grow over time, because they are a good opportunity for investors to diversify their portfolio, but also for governments to have resources to channel towards the sustainable ocean economy. At the same time, it's also a financing instrument that most investors are familiar with. So it's easier for them to invest in this. And they're also expected to grow in conjunction with the growth in the economic opportunities linked to ocean-based industries. But of course, there are some challenges to develop them, especially for developing countries. So in the report, we take the example of Cabo Verde, which is now trying to develop, with the support of the World Bank, a blue bond. And there are some issues, for example, linked to the, while the blue bond will also help to mobilize resources and also raise the profile of Cabo Verde as an actor in the space of the sustainable ocean economy globally. At the same time, while there are some credit enhancing feature in a blue bond, which makes the cost of borrowing basically lower than a regular bond, of course, the interest rate is still higher than concessional finance, and the blue bond still would have a lower maturity than concessional finance, and also would add up to a situation of already indebtedness of the country, which is of concern, and it's also the case for other developing countries. So we identify also some considerations to keep in mind, basically to help developing countries develop the blue bonds more sustainably, from developing a full strategy to how to allocate these resources, to having the blue bond as one of the financing instruments within a broader funding strategy, because of course we can't expect the blue bond to cover all of the financing need of the blue economy or sustainable ocean economy in a country, to supporting developing countries develop a pipeline of sustainable projects, which means not only developing the pipeline of projects, which is always or can be often a challenge, but also making sure that there is a real sustainability component, or that actually the integrity of to the full extent these projects contribute to sustainability. So now moving towards the third question, what is the role of the development cooperation can play to reorient finance away from unsustainable economic activities? Well, we said that, this is important, especially because while there are no comprehensive estimates on global finance towards the ocean economy, there are some indications that most of the funding, there's probably more unsustainable, there's more funding going towards unsustainable activities than the opposite. And if we look at, for example, the blue bond market, we've seen that it is very much in its infancy. We know that the green bond market, which is in a way a reference and even a target point for developing the blue bond market, is also very, very small. I mean, it accounts only for 0.6% of the global bond market. And even the global impact investing, which is also increasing in the space of the ocean economy, as we see in the report in greater detail, is growing fast. But again, it's a drop in the ocean compared to to global investments. So this is why we think that we need to take a two-track approach. So on one hand, the development community needs to support growing resources towards the sustainable ocean economy. And this is what we've seen before through different also blended finance arrangements and through support to some new financing instruments. But on the other hand, and this is the focus of this slide, the international development community also has a role to really make sure that sustainability concerns are mainstreamed in the bulk of global investments and corporate finance, both in ocean-based industries, but also in those industries that either directly or indirectly have an impact on ocean health. And so there is a role for the development community to support those global regulations and policies that are able to do that. And we have some ideas in the report, and also support those policy and financial levers that can help that. So one idea that we take from a paper by Geoffrey is the support, for example, to integrate sustainability requirements in exchange listing. We also know that there are several processes for developing principles, international principles, for sustainable blue finance. And so development partners also, we think, need to support this directly. And I'm sure that Dennis will be able to tell us more about this and how the international donor community can do that. And of course, then the international development community has a role to play to make sure that sustainability requirements are also integrated in ODA, but also in the lending of all development finance institutions, not all of which is necessarily concessional. So here you find some of the more general recommendations from the report, but I think we can probably touch on those also during maybe the discussion and questions and answer. So I will leave it there, and thank you for your attention, and really looking forward to your questions and comments, and to hearing Karima and Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piera, for this rich presentation. So now we have really lots of stuff to chew on and discuss about. And just to say again, if you would like to, put a question to Piera, but also to the discussion, to the panel now, there are 3 opportunities for doing that. A, the Q&A function for the Zoom. B, there's the chat. And C, you can raise your hand. But now I'm very pleased that we have Dennis Fritsch with us. Dennis is working for the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative, and more specifically on the Sustainable Blue Economy, where he's the project coordinator. And then we also have Karima Ustadi, who is an expert at the Italian Ministry of Environment, Land and Sea. Now, let me start maybe with Dennis. We basically have heard that finance for the ocean is increasing. Finance is increasing for ocean conservation, but not that much finance actually on sustainably focused traditional ocean industries. So I think it would be interesting to hear, but what you think could help to revert this trend. And then also maybe as a follow-on on kickoff question, there's as we heard, there's a lack of clear definitions and criteria on what finance for the sustainable ocean economy is. And it would be great to hear, how your work is helping to fill that gap. And also, what could the role of OECD be in this regard, and help push this agenda forward. So maybe, Dennis, if you start with these questions and get your perspectives, we'd be really keen to hear that.
Thanks very much, Jens, and also Piera for that great presentation of your report. Let me just start by sharing my screen. I hope that works, just to so you have a bit of background information on what we're all about. I hope you can see it, but just let me start by just giving you a very quick overview of what we're doing at UNEP-FI about the blue economy. So I lead the UNEP-FI initiative, which is the United Nations global community of banks, insurers, and investors. So working towards shaping the future of the finance industry, and this initiative really is focusing, as Jens mentioned, on ocean finance and the sustainable economy. And our aim is twofold, really. We want to bring the private sector together with global experts to promote the sustainable economy and raise awareness and educate the industry. But building on this, we also want to catalyze change by working with our members on useful tools and guidelines to really advance the transition globally towards a sustainable blue economy. And just to answer your first question, or try to answer your first question, the conservation finance for ecosystems is obviously critical, and I'm very happy to see that there's an increase for these projects, especially at a time when we urgently need to protect at least 30% of our oceans. Most financing, as everyone knows, for ocean conservation has traditionally come from public sources or from philanthropy, which is of course great and is very much needed still these days. However, in recent years, I think there has been a bit more capital coming from the private side, which is very encouraging. And an example is the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which was launched, I think, last year. Really, this is an economic development that has taken a lot of effort and convincing and collaboration to do from all sides. So this is very much encouraged. As you said, in terms of more traditional maritime sectors, for example, shipping or fishing, they've been lagging a bit. Although they're already in an advantageous position, in my opinion, because they have already traditionally worked with the private sector, so really with the people with the big pockets. So they're already known to these players and know how to engage with them. I think what is maybe a bit, well, what is a bit lacking on their side is maybe the awareness around, exciting new innovations like depth of nature swaps or parametric insurance for coral reefs. These are very new concepts. So I think awareness raising amongst these investors and financial players that work with more traditional industries is definitely one point. The second one I would like to highlight is really that we have a duty to really make clear that business case for sustainability. Because really, in my opinion, and as you know as well, is that there is a very strong business case for acting in a sustainable manner, especially I can think of fishing where it's very clear, and there's a World Bank report out 5 years ago almost now that highlighted that you can save a lot of money by acting sustainably, and also you can really lower your risk by having a sustainable approach to these more traditional maritime sectors. So I think it really is a link between risks, opportunity, and sustainability, and we have to make that as clear as possible. It really needs to be a no-brainer for these financial institutions and companies to choose the sustainable approach. And then we will really see these much needed financial flows into these sectors. To your second question, and I don't want to duplicate anything that Pierre already mentioned, of course. I completely agree that there is kind of a lack of definitions and criteria about what finance for a sustainable blue economy is right now. And that's obviously due to the sustainable economy in most parts of the world, and with many financial institutions being fairly novel. It's a fairly new concept, really, to see it holistically, not just as siloed as the fishing industry and the shipping industry. And so it's really kind of to see the whole of the ocean economy. That's, I think, fairly recent. And at UNFFI, with the initiative that I lead, we really want to address exactly this gap. So just to give you a bit of background, the origin story, if you so will, of the initiative starts in 2018 when we developed the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles, which really are the gold standard globally and market first for sustainable blue economy activities. A bit comparable to the UNPRI, if you so will, but really focusing on banking, insurers, and investors. And since late 2019, we host these principles at UNFFI and promote their adoption across financial institutions globally. And our main focus this year is to produce sectoral guidance on how to implement these principles and how to be active in the sustainable blue economy, focusing on banking, insurance, and investing. And we really want to make this guidance usable and actionable. So we're really aware of the fact that there is a need for clarifying what that means to be sustainable and what can be done as a financial institution. Obviously, we're working not only with the financial institutions directly, but also with non-financial institutions who are members and who are experts on the topic to really make sure that this is as appropriate as possible. And one way that the OECD is already helping us in this is by being a member and actively participating in the working group for this. So thanks very much for that. And I think as well, what really is quite important, which we would need your help on, and where the OECD can really have a big contribution, would be to really facilitating the conversation with policymakers and governments, because of course financial institutions don't exist in a vacuum, and there really is a big need to create enabling conditions for these developments. So speaking to public policymakers, regulators, political actors, and these developments are very crucial to support the transition toward a sustainable blue economy. So that definitely is a role that, in my eyes, the OECD can definitely play. And I'll leave it at that, being aware of time constraints. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over back to you, Jens.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for these insights and your work. That sounds really fascinating, and looking forward to getting a bit further into that. Now, Karima, we've heard from UNEP as at international level trying to enhance sustainability, coming up with approaches through the UNEP financial inquiry. How is now, as we turn to you, it's more the perspective of a country, and I think it would be really great if you could share with us a bit of how Italy is supporting ocean conservation, but also helping to enhance the sustainability in specific ocean-based sectors, and also get a sense of, as you know, we have heard there's no official definition in member countries. At least there wasn't at the time when I think we were writing the report of what sustainable ocean ODA means. But could you tell us about whether you have an approach and maybe how Italy and other providers prioritize ocean sustainability and integrate that into ODA interventions? Please, the floor is yours, Karima.
Thank you very much, Jens, and thank you to all the team that worked on this really enlightening report and study. And just to rephrase what Dr. Moreira da Silva was saying before, that I believe that it's been really a community effort, a joint effort in the OECD, because the matter is really horizontal. And I mean, that's what we also, I also felt, in our ministry, which is the Ministry of Environment, that, gathering this kind of information means really to put together a lot of pieces. So we have, different ministries that are dealing with the matter. And as you were saying very properly, the sector is so broad and so horizontal that the development cooperation is a part of it. So as you said, Jens, and you introduced me, and then thank you again, Italy is actually committed to support a sustainable ocean economy, which is also called ocean-based economy or blue economy. So also from the language, we can understand that it's a really broad issue, and where maybe that's maybe for the end, but where the OECD, I think, can really help governments to to have a coherent approach, because the OECD really has a peculiar point of view. And a special point of view, and where the OECD is really able to entertain a dialogue with the different dimensions of the government. And it's not easy within a government to coordinate among different ministries. So the OECD can certainly help, as Dennis was saying, the exchange between the levels of government and the ministries. So Italy is, of course, committed to support a blue economy or sustainable ocean economy through development cooperation and exploiting the synergies between the improvement and the support of sustainable ocean economy as a dimension of adaptation mainly. So as you were saying correctly, Jens, we don't have an official definition. As all the DAC members, it's been a surprise. But we also have a working definition, which mainly it's really an operational definition. So we use that definition, which refers to the ecosystems, the support of marine resources and the conservation of ocean and fisheries, for example, and we use this definition really to interact with beneficiaries and with developing countries when defining the project level activities. So again, also in a very operational dimension, the ocean-based economy is really horizontal, and it's very important to us, the dimension where the, and it's also one of the recommendations, when the developing country and the beneficiary country really put it as a priority in their national strategies and the priorities. So, of course, the having an SDG, a dedicated SDG, really helped these, this interaction with the beneficiaries and helped it to put it as a priority of action. So, as a whole, basically, I mean, Italy is really supporting activities in 3-4 areas mainly, and we find ourselves in also in the 6 sectors that the report stress, which is the use of renewables to support the ocean related activities, is the field of early warning systems and the risk assessment, the protection of biosphere, so the protection of ocean and marine protected areas, and the field of education awareness and capacity building with respect to the public or the governments themselves. Just to say a few words on best practices, so to say, which really linked the economic dimension with the sustainable and protection of the ocean and its resources. One of the really good projects that has been implemented and funded by the Ministry of Environment has been in Kiribati, a very responsive partner, where the ministry, through like a 5-year program, helped the Kiribati to electrify fishing centers. So basically substituting the diesel generator, electricity generator, with a solar power generator to power the refrigerators, which is really important, of course, for a fishing center. And with the money basically spared to from buying the diesel, these funds, this money has been put away for the maintenance of the solar power. So, it's also in this case, you can really see how horizontal is an ocean-based activity, and really is a whole of society and whole of government issue. Regarding disaster risk management, the Ministry of Environment funded basically systems of early warning. For example, in St. Lucia, where and in the Maldives, where the ministry funded like the installation of meteorological monitoring stations, and with again, a whole government effort to gather this data and share the information as quickly as possible. So we have a lot of good examples also from other donors, of course, in this sense. I would also like to spare 2 words for a very good project, a very nice project in Palau, where we understand how important is the dimension of awareness and education and which, I mean, education and awareness helps the use and the implementation and the success of course, an economic instrument. In this case, the ministry funded the institution and the of a very large marine protection area. In a wider project called Palau Legacy, for the dissemination of environmental and cultural values related to sustainable management of marine protected areas. And in this context, basically a system of payment of ecosystem services has been established, where the tourists at their arrival are asked to not only commit in you know, where in the use of the services, for instance, in the hotels or I mean the services they are using, a part of this money is going to the management of the marine protected area, but also they're asked to commit to the future generations. So, and committing to the future generations, and upon their arrival, the tourist is really asked to sign this commitment to the future. And this really helped to accept a higher price for the services that are provided by the nature, by the ecosystems. So these two aspects are really linked together. We have, of course, some other projects linked to the also still in the 6 sectors identified by the report, and I mean, all in all, I mean, also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is really involved in a big project, which is a forthcoming project in Kenya, and on which we had like some preparatory projects already. It's a very recent development. So we expect to fund with a substantial contribution this project in Kenya, which is really focused on ocean-based economy and blue economy, maybe. So that's all in terms of examples, and I just wanted to to refer to the one of the issues that Piera was talking about, and it's about mainstreaming, and it's really and you know, that's one of the findings also, and the importance of mainstreaming again in a government perspective as a provider of development cooperation, and whole of government approach in the recipient side. So this is really fundamental in this context, as the ocean-based economy is really, I mean, it cannot be really developed and faced and without collaborative approaches throughout. So in terms, again, of definition, I'm sorry to say that still we don't have an official definition, but still we rely on the working definition that we had back in time. But still, we are also committed through different multilateral channels to support the blue economy. For instance, we contribute to the UNEP map. In 2017, our ministers signed the Because the Ocean Declaration. So it's something that is really developing. But as we know, the perspective from which to see this issue is are many, and really an integration and you know, I don't even know how to say, you know, we really need to systematize all of the efforts, all of the knowledge and the different perspectives where from which these the oceans and its activities, and part of which the development cooperation is an important piece of the matter. So I hope I've been exhaustive, and of course I hope you can. I hope I triggered some questions as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Karima. That was great, and especially also the concrete examples that you provided there, and how you're dealing, with the complexity also of a new area that involves many parts of the government and many departments. So now let's go to some questions, but also let me acknowledge Sarah McLennan from the UK Department on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who is looking to make a contribution. Maybe a question as well. Or just before I call on you, Sarah, should just point out that we have a couple of questions. There's one question on the in the actual question and answer section on the role of OECD that I leave Piera to ponder, as Sarah will come onto the floor. And then there are two more questions on small island developing states and on the maturity of markets. So maybe already Sarah may also come in on those, or you may ask your own questions and put some challenges, but then we can take them back after that also to the panel. So with that, Sarah, please come in.
Super, thank you. And I will just make a short contribution. We're aware of the time, but I did just want to briefly highlight the work that the UK is doing in this space, as well as to congratulate the OECD on this work, which has been really great to see and to be engaged in the process. The UK government, as sounds similar to what we heard earlier, is committed to continue to lead work on the international economic recovery, to deliver a UK and a world economy that's stronger, cleaner, more sustainable, and more resilient, especially after the COVID crisis. And as part of this, the marine environment, the marine economy, and marine science will offer significant contributions to a clean and resilient recovery. As part of this, the UK has ambitious plans for offshore wind to enable not only our climate commitments, at the same time as protecting the marine environment. Our marine planning system is going through changes and updates to make sure that we can maximise the full benefits of the marine environment, both in GVA terms as well as natural capital. From our side, investment in the recovery needs to ensure that we are helping to reduce our exposure to environmental and climate risks through the sustainable use and protection and restoration of natural systems to address these triple challenges we have of biodiversity loss, climate change, and an economic recovery. So in the international space for us in the UK, this is an important time for action for us, with the rescheduled conferences in 2021 under the CBD and UNFCCC. Specifically, also, the UK government is calling for a target to protect at least 30% of the global ocean within marine protected areas and other effective conservation measures by 2030. And we are hoping that this 30 by 30 target will be adopted as part of the new targets under the Convention on Biological Diversity. Part of this work on marine protected areas and wider conservation, as well as through enabling private finance, which we heard quite a lot about, will be supported through the Blue Planet Fund. So the UK government has a commitment to a 500 million fund over the following years for official development assistance, which will protect and enhance marine ecosystems through the sustainable management of ocean resources to reduce poverty in developing countries. And the work of this fund will recognise this indivisible link which heard between ocean health and its effect on poverty alleviation, and also the sustainable development prospects of the world's most disadvantaged communities. We're looking at everything in this fund, from the enabling role of science for making better decisions around enabling and ensuring better resilience to climate change, through looking at the management of our seas and biodiversity, as well as through seafood and the approaches that we can have through this. This work of OECD then fits in really well to this fund, which will be launched next year, because it enables us to then show and fit in how finance can then enable a sustainable marine economy. This work it's important because it highlights the small proportion of current ODA which is dedicated to the ocean and the sustainable ocean economy, and it shows the role that the UK can play in not only playing our part with their public funds, but also enabling private finance, partially through the Blue Planet Fund. The OECD plays such an important role bringing together countries to start and promote these common definitions and principles and standards, partially to make sure that we can direct a greater proportion of finance, but also that finance, which is then, in a sense, classified as being blue or sustainable blue, does in fact end up having this aim to make sure that these standards are robust enough so that we can have confidence that it will have this aim that we are seeking. But also, and importantly, that we can mainstream these approaches in wider finance, so that there is this approach which is going wider. And I think in short, continuing this discussion, making sure that, as the OECD does, has this across countries, so we're sharing our learning and sharing the challenges that we have when we try to classify things, will be of utmost importance for us in the UK, and we're really keen to continue this conversation with the OECD. I unfortunately can't see the specific comments which are questions which are there. I'm on my phone, but I'll leave it at that for just now from the UK.
Thanks a lot, Sarah, and great to hear about all your plans and your action in this area, and very much looking forward to continuing the engagement in our work. Now, maybe with that, let me pass back to Piera, Dennis, and Karima, and just read out first the written question on how does the OECD record financial support to projects addressing land-based sources of pollution and littering. That's maybe a bit more for Piera. Then on the questions for the market maturity, again, everybody's welcome to answer, but I guess it's very much also one thing that is for for Dennis. And I think the question on the SIDS, just for those who haven't had the opportunity to read that, I think there's the point that SIDS, by virtue of their small size, obviously, they do not have the finances or necessary technical capacity to, for instance, establish a blue economy office. So, the question is, how can they seek assistance in establishing a blue economy office to generate and secure the financing and the technical support and expertise to tap into the potential, which at this point is difficult. So with that, let me pass back. Who would like to go first? Anybody? Maybe let's start with Piera, and then Dennis and Karima. Piera, please.
Yes. Thank you, Jens, and thank you everybody for their contributions and for the questions. So very quickly on the tracking, we have developed for this work 3 main indicators: one to track ODA to the ocean economy, and then another one to track ODA to the sustainable ocean economy, which will be a subset of that. But we also created an indicator to track ODA, as referred in the question, to track how much finance is going to support activities that reduce land-based impacts on the ocean. And so for that, basically what we have done, we have used the ODA creditor reporting system, as I mentioned before, and we have developed a methodology which is basically reliant on a keyword search that then we have implemented through computer coding. So all the details are actually, or some of the details are in the report, and some of them are also in the data platform section that Alberto will talk us through in a few minutes. So I will leave it there, and happy then to come in maybe bilaterally if there's more questions. On the seeds, I think we do have a section in the report, and we see that there is only a tiny part of ODA to seeds that is allocated to sustainable ocean economy. So for us, there is also a call for action in the report to really support those countries that have a potential in the ocean economy, but do have many constraints in accessing finance. And I think some of the new resources that countries are putting in place, like the resources that Sarah was talking about, the new fund from the UK and other new funds that are being established, should definitely have a focus also on these countries that have great opportunities when it comes to the ocean economy, but very limited also capacities and access to finance overall.
Many thanks, Piera. Dennis, would you like to go next?
Sure. And question when you talk about market. I'm happy to give a couple of thoughts on that. Matthew asking about the kind of the distinctive sectors and more.
Dennis, sorry, you're coming in. The audio is not very good there. It's a bit spotty. Maybe try again, or otherwise we'll let Karima come in first if she likes.
All right.
Another try.
Okay. Does that work? Can you hear me okay?
For now works, yeah.
Okay, let me try that. Okay, so it's kind of around the distinction between having more and more kind of innovative emerging, how they're financed. Yes, I agree. Is it still really bad?
Yeah, I think it's coming on and off. So
I'm sorry for that.
Maybe let's wait and let's go to Karima and see if you want to also come in on any of the questions, or otherwise pass on.
Sure. Thank you, Jens, for the floor. And just to maybe come in to Kim Valier's question on how to maybe get funding. So certainly, at least for Italy, it's very important that priorities are put in national strategies. It's very important that the recipient countries has a clear priorities and clear ideas, even at project level ideas, and very operational and so to say bankable project, so it's really important that in order to get funding, for instance, for a blue economy office, which was a very good idea, to put this idea and this priority in a national strategy, in a project document, a strategic document from the government itself, because that's what Italy at least looks at to base their funding and their activities and their support to developing countries. Just to stress that Italy is really working a lot with the seeds, especially with Pacific seeds, but also in the CARICOM area, so in the Caribbean area. And as there has been like a decade-long cooperation history with the small islands. So I really hope that more commitments are going to the most vulnerable countries, especially. So just to trigger again, how we see how much important it is in our view that the OECD helps helps the government to come together and define to work on a definition of a sustainable ocean economy with regard to development cooperation. But as I was saying before, this is a very much broader issue, which needs to really exert a particular effort also at the government level, and where the OECD, of course, can help broadly as well. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Karima, for this additional contribution. Let's now see if we can get Dennis in a solid audio quality. Dennis, please go.
Yes. What I might try is stopping my video and seeing if that helps.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks.
All right, perfect. So I just wanted to give a very quick couple of thoughts on the classification of traditional versus more emerging blue economy sectors or themes, and how their finance and investment needs are. So Matteo Borci, he highlighted that the kind of really that emerging blue economy activities which are a bit more innovative, like renewable, blue biotechs, but I can also think of other themes like blue carbon or coastal resilience projects are maybe a bit underfunded at the moment, and I think that's definitely correct. these, as I mentioned earlier, are a bit more, let's say, unknown. They don't necessarily, at least from the private finance side, it's a bit more risky to put money on the table for these projects, but there is a development in that area with a lot of smaller investment funds, private finance investment funds focusing on impact investment, but also accelerators that are popping up everywhere right now, really focusing on ocean innovation. So that is happening, although slowly. So at least from the private finance side, that's something that is happening. In terms of the more traditional sectors, like shipping and fisheries, they currently have the biggest negative impact in the way they operate. Really, at UWFI, we want to make sure that investors who are already working with these sectors can engage with these, because everyone knows they need to change, they need to transition. I'm thinking decarbonizations in the shipping sector or to fisheries, and I think company engagement or portfolio company engagement is something that can be very powerful. And I think that's only backed up by Credit Suisse's and Rockefeller Asset Management's recent launch of the Ocean Engagement Fund. I think it was last week. So this is really a topic that is seen as powerful, and where financial institutions are really able to bring about change with their already with those companies that are already invested. Questions.
Thanks, Dennis. Towards the end, it was fading away, but I think we got most of it, so that's great. Now, let me just say we have one more short part that we want to go into now, don't want you to miss, and that's sort of a presentation of the ODA data platform, where you can also go and find the most important relevant data and have a look and play with that. Let me also acknowledge the question from Catherine from Agence Française de Développement, which we don't have much time to answer, but just to say that we want to update ODA figures on an annual basis, and then we're looking forward to discussing further on this. But without further ado, let me quickly pass the floor to Alberto, who worked a lot on the data underlying all that what we discussed today, and give a very quick presentation of the data platform. Albi, please.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. My name is Alberto Agnelli, and I work with Piera and Jens at the OECD Development Cooperation Directorate. And I was involved in developing the methodology to extract ocean-related projects from what we call the creditor reporting system. That is this database that is housed at the OECD, where we have project-level information on development cooperation initiatives. And so the need to find a way to extract ocean-related projects from this database was there because so far there was no immediate way to basically retrieve projects that were just targeting the ocean among all development cooperation projects. And so what we did was basically to try to create this methodology that through a keyword search would identify which projects were supporting ocean-based industries and the conservation and sustainable use of the ocean. And now we wanted to make this data that we also use in the report available to everybody, policymakers and any other user that might be interested. And so we created this data visualization tool that I will paste the link in the chat after I'm done with presenting this, where you can basically navigate all the data that are in the report on the ODA for the ocean economy and how much of this ODA actually targets sustainability. So now it's just reloading. And basically here on this platform, you can have all the information by recipient country and donor country. And so you can navigate and see the profiles of each and see profiles for recipient providers and also data on private finance mobilise. Now we are having an issue reloading. But I will just like paste the link in the chat so that then you can just access it. And if you have any question on the data, on the methodology, you can just follow up with me and Piera, and we can just like reply in more detail on all the questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Albi. So let's make sure we put the link in the chat, and I hope you can all go and have a look and play a bit with the data. This brings us pretty much to the end of our session, of our webinar. Thanks again for all those who joined. Maybe let me just take away a few points that we heard, I think, that came through quite systematically. I mean, this is of course an ongoing effort. We just launched a big report. We have a focus on development cooperation, and we're certainly going to continue that work, as we heard today, because there's lots of needs in terms of working further on the definitions, on policy coherence, etc. Now, I think the first point in that regard for me really is to say that we saw the big potential of the ocean economy for development in developing countries and the role of development cooperation. But again, to say that potential is contingent on a clear focus on sustainability. And I think for that, what came out very much was the importance of a definition in a way of a taxonomy, because that's what you need to have coherent approaches in terms of the policies. But I think that's also what you need basically to be able to generate markets, to scale up finance, because unless you have a terminology of what means what, you're not going to be able to mobilize, for instance, the private finance that we're looking for. I think the other point is also that it's, we heard the importance of mainstreaming from Karima. And again, I think the challenge sometimes of, the capacity, we had the question from the SIDS countries on SIDS, of the capacity of establishing the office. And I think really the importance of knowledge, they're saying to say, at the end of the day, a lot of that comes just back of internalizing the externalities, because we all know, and there have been many reports that sustainability is just good economics, and it will deliver superior results. At the same time, the challenges of that it's basically works as a public good, and private markets left to themselves are not good at supplying public goods in an optimal way. So I think a lot comes back to fairly basic economical principles, and just say, we should be doing this anyway, and we need to understand it better, how we do it, how we integrate it into financing, into policy. But it's just plain good development that we should be doing. With that, let me not try to go further, but let me thank again all our contributors. First, starting with Jorge Moreira da Silva and Russell Reichelt, who had to leave us unfortunately already. Lots of thanks to Karima and Dennis for their contributions, and we look forward to working further with you. And then, of course, last but not least, to Piera and Alberto, who were sort of our main forces behind the report on our side of the OECD, and also to Sabrina Buldi, who has been helping with ensuring all the logistics and the run of the meeting. So thanks a lot to all of you. We look forward to staying engaged and being in touch again very soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.